Thank you.
Yes.
We are official. To continue to move through our meeting in official order, I'd like to open up for the nomination of a chairperson for tonight's meeting.
I'll nominate you.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christopher. There's been a motion by John and a second by Christopher, and anyone who's a resident can also engage in votes in this meeting. All those in favor of myself, Jennifer Murphy, serving as chairperson of this meeting, signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you all. So now moving through to official business again, those of you who are present for the meeting, if you are a resident, you are able to vote on any of the resolutions that will be discussed and offered up tonight for vote. But to get us kicked off, we'll take a financial report from our treasurer, Joe Haynes.
Yes, so anyone who wants to read the written treasurer's report, it's in board docs. That document lays out pretty clearly what I think to be is the financial health of the district, which is extremely strong. What I prefer to do with this time while I have a captive audience and you all have to listen to me is to speak a little bit more generally about our financial performance in this last year and how I think it reflects our values as a board, because I think you can tell a lot about an organization's values by where they choose to commit their resources. And I think that we've done a really good job of doing that this year, particularly in an environment with school district finances where it's really hard because you're dealing with a lot of competing priorities, and it's not as if we can just bring in more revenue because we want to spend more. But I think we've done a really good job of that, and you can tell that by what we've accomplished this year. Number one, we continue to invest in our staff, keeping to make sure our staff are compensated at or close to the highest in Dane County. At the same time, it's a priority of ours to try and keep our community's tax rates low. We're aware of rising property values, and while we don't have any role in that process, we do get information about what our municipalities have in terms of the average equalized value or the amount of total equalized value for those municipalities, and we try and lower your taxes at a rate commensurate with what those average increases are. So it's an important value to us as a board that we try and balance what we're doing against the tax burden that we're placing on our residents. And lastly, especially this year, we've really tried to keep one eye on the future. We do that in a couple ways. One is managing our debt, our long-term debt, in a responsible way. We've continued to make early payments on our debt, and that strategy has yielded us, I think, at this point, over $7 million in total savings on that debt. But what we've also done this year is purchase land to help ensure our district's long-term future in terms of what we do with where we put our students, because we're a growing district. So those are things that we've done. We've managed to do all those things this year, balance those competing priorities, and I think we've done a really good job at it. The second thing that I want to talk about this year, because it's financial oversight, because that's one of the key things that we do as a board. And you've seen in some media reporting this year, there's been some attention paid to what you might call financial irregularities in other school districts, definitely not ours. And I want to speak to what we do and what our governance model does to help ensure that something like that doesn't happen here and that our community's tax dollars are well looked after. The first thing I want to say is that we definitely trust our financial team implicitly. I think that Chad and Pete and their team are a huge reason of why we've been able to manage all those competing priorities in such a successful way that I talked about before. But one of the things we talk about as a board is that trust isn't an oversight strategy. We still need to do our job as a board and ensure financial oversight. And that's what our entire governance model is based off of. If you've listened to any of our board meetings, you've probably heard us use the phrase OEs a lot. Those stand for our operational expectations. That's the way we communicate to the administration about what we expect them to do. And then we hold them accountable to those expectations. In the area of financial oversight, some examples of our OEs, and you can find all of these online, they're all available. But in the area of financial oversight, some examples of OEs are that administration can't develop a budget that spends more than is reasonably expected to be available this year. Another one is that administration must maintain a fund balance that's like what our cash flow is at the end of the year, how much we have sitting in our account of at least 10% of the overall budget. And we've exceeded that significantly every year, including this past year. And administration cannot allow any financial activity that materially deviates from the approved budget. So that's one of these things that when new things come up throughout the year, we're talking about it here at this table and we're voting on budget amendments. That we're changing the budget that we approved because something comes up that materially deviates from what we've already approved. And most importantly, we get an annual audit every year from an outside audit agency that looks at all our accounts. And if there are any, makes recommendations for improvements, but just make sure all our accounts are in good working order. And our operational expectations require that that be presented to us no later than December each year. And that's something that we do and we look at. Dr. Clarity every year has to come to us with evidence that he has met each of these expectations. That's what we do with our governance model. He has to take each of those OEs and prove to us that he's in compliance with it. And that's, our whole governance model is based on that. And I think all of that together helps ensure that we're taking good care of all your tax dollars. And I think if you look at both kind of what we've presented here in the written treasurer's report that shows the performance of this past year, I think we're doing a pretty good job at it. That's all I have.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for being responsive as your chairperson rearranged the order of the meeting from the very get-go. So I appreciate that. And apologies to Chad and Pete, as I did just what I claimed and did a little rearranging of things. So I'd like to now welcome Chad and Pete to give us an overview of our VASD proposed 24-25 budget. Thank you two for joining us and for again going with the flow of this meeting as we're going to do things today.
I thought the rearrangement worked perfect because much of what Joe said is going to be
there we go.
Pete and I presenting the annual budget, and to President Murphy's point, this is certainly an interactive meeting. If anyone in the audience has questions around anything going on with us wrapping up the 23-24 budget or entering into the 24-25 budget, which will be officially in the books now in 5 or 6 weeks, but we're getting much closer. So good to be here. Wanted to ground us in terms of where we're heading tonight. Joe did an excellent job grounding us in board policy. So we actually have a slide for that we'll go through. We're going to review our budget calendar for the year. We have a couple of brief slides on how 23-24 are wrapping up. And then we're going to present the 24-25 budget, which is really just a high-level summary of this budget book, which is available for anyone who wants one. This evening is also posted online. So it is great to see everyone, and then we'll in general transition us into the annual meeting where we'll have a number of votes this evening. So again, I don't even want to double down on what Joe said. I thought what he said was perfect in terms of OE5 really setting the stage for our entire budgeting process and all of the fail-safes and measures of accountability built into this policy to make sure that our team, in the end, our superintendent, is doing the job as outlined in OE5 in this policy. A few key dates kind of looking back and looking ahead. So we did release this draft budget book to the board back in August and had a few added pieces of information fall into place while we presented this to the board. School board passed the budget that's contained in this book on September 9th. It's been published on our website and available via the Verona Press and the posting we do on an annual basis. We had the third Friday count just last week, and Pete and members of our kind of power school team are working through the numbers there. Here we sit tonight at the annual meeting. Eventually, we will get final state aid in terms of what we are going to get from the state of Wisconsin, which does have an impact on where our final levy ends up. And that's part of the biggest vote tonight for annual meetings around the state when we're doing annual meetings at school districts is relative to the levy. And that is super dependent on the number of students we have and what we get from the state of Wisconsin aid. And we're certainly happy to answer questions on how all those are interchangeable and play back and forth with one another. We will set the final budget at the board meeting on October 21st. So again, tonight is voting on our best guess of where our budget will end up in October. And then all the paperwork has to be filed off of Pete's desk when we set the levy in November. Just wanted to call out that there's a more detailed calendar in our budget book, and this is just a screenshot of that. Quick year in review in terms of where we think we're going to end up. So a little timeline in terms of our 23-24 budget, which is now a year and a half ago, that budget year, but did wrap up in July. Pete and our team are wrapping up the 23-24 budget with the audit that Joe mentioned going on right now and will be presented to the school board here in December. And we had many of the same strategies with the 23-24 budget and the 24-25 budget we're presenting tonight. And I think it's worth taking a look back where we continue to have an eye on tax impact and leverage the school levy credit and net new construction to do what we could to keep existing tax payers' tax bills on our end in check. And we used that strategy again this year. We ended up pausing prepayment on debt for a year. And what that did for the 23-24 budget was we ended up making a pretty substantial deposit in fund balance, quote unquote. And that turned to be a wise strategy where we had a couple of one-time purchases. One, the Lacey property, which was purchased in the 23-24 budget and set the stage for us to purchase land in Fitchburg out of this year's budget. And that is built into this budget book. When we get there, we were able to compensate our staff in line with CPI and continue to manage mill rate. And that's kind of last year's budget in a nutshell and in a slide. Here's where we believe we're going to end up, and this number is now getting closer and closer as Pete and his team work through verifying this through our audit. But this is where we ended up in terms of our overall general revenues and expenses. Our beginning fund balance was a little about $28 million as we wrap the year up. Our unaudited general fund balance is about $32 million, and that's as we wrap up as of July 1st of this year. And Joe mentioned that 10% threshold that exists in OE5. Our fund balance, as we wrap up the audited version, we will believe will be in the neighborhood of about 33%. That's for last year's budget. So we are in sound financial shape as far as having the appropriate amount of cash on hand at July 1st checkpoint. Questions on the 23-24 budget at all? Or I will get going into 24-25. So again, this is a high-level summary of the 70-ish pages that are built into the budget book that we have presented this evening. A few key pieces that we've been working on for the year. At this point, we believe the budget we're presenting to the community tonight will have little to no tax increase on the average property owner in a high inflation environment. And we're doing that with a few tools we'll present tonight. Already built into this budget that the board already voted on was a 4.12% CPI increase for staff. We are going to get into a little bit more detail tonight regarding our debt management strategy that will come into effect and is built into this book that we're presenting this evening. And we held back some funds for the property purchases, some of which we'll be closing on as early as tomorrow, school board. We close on 2 of those parcels tomorrow. So all the Fitchburg properties are kind of starting to wrap up already, which is exciting. This should be a familiar slide, at least to our school board, and this is the delicate balance every school district in the state of Wisconsin feels on an annual basis, where we've got on the left side our salary benefits and staffing, the debt we have to manage, and just the ongoing operating expenses of our school district, and balancing that with what we get in aid, what we get in taxes, and that's our levy, and where we finally end up with our mill rate. That's the taxing ratio that ends up finally setting our levy and the one we're going to present this evening. We used a few tools in this budget, and I'll just comment again on that bottom line, where our available tools for managing our levy will be net new construction, what we get in state aid, anything we have for increased equalized property value, and that school levy credit that we did use as a tool in this budget to manage existing homeowners or property owners' property taxes. And here is that school tax credit that we've been talking through the year. The big idea there is the lawmakers in the state of Wisconsin set aside two big buckets of money to offset property taxes. One was in the form of state aid, and that is actually money the state of Wisconsin sends our school district to operate the school. And it's money that does not come right from local property taxpayers. The other bucket of money that saw a significant increase in the 23 to 25 state budget was something called school levy credits. And that is actually just money that goes to essentially municipalities to offset what's happening with the levy that Pete will post in the end. So it's money the school district does not see. It is intended for property tax relief. And we've made a decision the last year and this year to utilize that existing school levy credit because we have a taxing authority with the capital debt we've got on hand to make some decisions regarding where the final levy ends up and what we do to manage existing capital debt. And we believe that this strategy, a slightly lowered mill rate, doing what we can to stabilize existing property taxes and prepaying on capital debt is the right spot for our budget to exist, at least for the last couple of years. So, and this graphic actually ended up in the Verona Press, and I'm hoping it's relatively easy for everyone to follow. So from top to bottom, that is the tax impact line. And this year, we will see in the end, in the budget we're presenting to you, a 4.9% increase of our tax levy relative to last year. And that's our estimate until we find out how many students we have and what we get in aid. What we do have a decent idea on, because some of these numbers have already been posted, is that we're going to end up, we believe, somewhere close to 4% in net new construction. And what that means is if we had everyone who paid taxes last year, 4% of this year's taxpayers didn't own property last year. So we've got 4% new taxpayers, a new tax base, and new properties existing in our school district. And that's a valuable tool that we're deciding to use. And there's that line on that school levy credit, which was a little over $1 million. In the end, that all comes down to a reduced mill rate and what we believe will be, on average, a neutral property tax bill for schools. And I think this is a good time for me to mention, as we're talking taxes, there are many other things that can end up in your property tax bill. The city of Fitchburg is going to referendum to raise property taxes in Fitchburg to increase or keep their services ongoing. There's a tax in there for MATC and all your municipal services. We're a portion of it, and we're the largest portion of the property tax bill you pay, but we're not the only one that has an impact in the end in terms of what that tax bill looks like. A quick post here, and we'll be certainly much closer by the time Pete and our team hand in where we ended up with third Friday count. But did want to mention per our last study, which happened 3 years ago, we had an estimated increase of 50 students for how many added students we built into this budget. We believe we're actually going to come in a little under that with what we saw on third Friday. The fact that we still had operating permission left over from our past operating referendum, that number it's less important that we're perfectly exact on that this year. Next year, we're going to redo our enrollment projections because we've moved away from accepting new students with open enrollment. And we actually predict that number to be down a little bit when we present this budget book next year. We still are a growing school district. Us using the lever of closing off some open enrollment to slow that growth a little bit will be a factor that we'll build into future budgets. Now for our projected fund balance for the 24-25 budget. As you can see here, that $32 million number we reported to you, an unaudited number for 23-24. Here are projected revenues and expenditures. And for the first time since Pete and I and Dr. Clarity have been here, we're presenting you an unbalanced budget. And this is in line with school board policy because we would not want to present you a budget that would take us below our fund balance threshold or present a budget to you that we're not able to pay the bills, and that's not the case. We built $8.5 million into the purchase of the land and the professional services that go along with closing the Fitchburg land deal. And instead of having $8.5 million in fund balance, we will be the owners of 8+ acres, and that we, the Verona area taxpayers, will be the owners of a valuable asset in Fitchburg for a future school site. And that's where we end up with that estimate for fund balance. If we continue to budget like we have in the past, I certainly expect our year end to wrap up by the time Pete and I are here next year, somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million, because we don't spend every nickel that we put into the revenue and expenditure line. So revenues typically, which is where you want to set a budget, revenues typically outpace expenditures to the tune of 1 or 2% every year. And that's where we expect fund balance to end up in 24-25, and it's where we've estimated it will. I'm going to pause and take a breath to see if anyone has a question. Okay. We did wanted to get, and Joe mentioned this briefly in his treasurer's report, we wanted to give a little more detail this evening on our strategy relative to managing debt, which is not perfectly unique statewide, but I don't think there are a ton of school districts that take advantage of it quite like the Verona area school district does. So we have millions of dollars, over $100 million of debt that the district owes relative to the building we're sitting in right now. And for the last 4 years, have made a decision to prepay some of that debt. And wanted to walk through why we believe that strategy is still one that we should continue to pursue and is built into the budget book we're presenting tonight. Why would we want to defease debt, which means prepay debt, and in the case of defeasance, prepaying debt to the tune of setting aside money for debt that is not even callable yet. And this has worked well for us for the following reasons. One, we've been able to strategically manage the mill rate. If you look at our mill rate history, it's not yo-yoing, which means it's not up, down, up, down, up, down. In fact, our mill rate the last 5 years has steadily gone down because we have not had years that we've spiked it for ongoing expenses and then shrunk it the following year. So tax bills have been you've been able to track what's going on with our taxes relative to our school district. We're going to walk through interest savings tonight. We've been able to pay off some projects early. We're defeasing this debt because we don't have callable debt on the books right now. And one of the biggest things that worked for us at the last operating referendum is there will likely be a time that this school board will make a decision to go back to referendum. And that may be to build a new school. That may be for ongoing operating expenses that are not covered by our annual state budget, or it could be both. And what this has done is it allows us to have a softer landing relative to mill rate because we're over levying to pay down capital debt. We believe that has two benefits, that soft landing and interest savings. To the tune, as Joe mentioned, just our recent 5 or 6 year history, we have saved the taxpayers of the Verona area school district $7.5 million that we will not have to pass on in the form of tax bills down the road to pay down our capital debt. That is a significant amount of money, $7.5 million of interest savings by our debt management work over the last 4 or 5 years. This is what's built into this year's budget book and what we worked with on the board, I'm going to say spring, when we presented this and got some guidance from our school board. We ended up in a place that we are going to defease, if everything holds true, $6.5 million that will eventually go to prepaying capital debt relative to mainly the high school. That defeasance alone will save $2.68 million in interest that we will not have to tax taxpayers for in the end, and it stabilizes our mill rate. If the board elected not to do this, we pull $6.5 million out of our levy. The mill rate has a 1-year dip, and then in the end, 1, 2, 3, 4 years from now, if we end up going to referendum for a new school or operating expenses, that goes along with a big tax increase as the ask. And so we're doing the opposite. We're prepaying debt. We're saving on a ton of interest. That number will be close to $10 million after this budget year's done. And we're stabilizing what's going on with taxes. So I just wanted to get that in the space. I know the board understands that, but that has certainly been a strategy that has served us well the last 4 or 5 years. Here's some screenshots out of our budget book. You can see our budget, that lower right-hand number, increased percentage from the year before. The reason that number is so much different than the 4.9% levy increase that we mentioned before is that land purchase. $8.5 million of property is built into this budget, which means our expenditures are 11.5% more than they were the year before. A little bit on mill rate. As I mentioned before, we hit a mill rate of 12.77, not that long ago. And all the way back to 2021, where we had a targeted mill rate of 13.35. Our mill rate will be, we believe, by the time the budget's set this year, below 11 for the first time in well over a decade. And I think that's important for people to understand, which means proportionately, properties are worth way more than they have been historically, and the ratio of what we're taxing versus your property value is less than it's historically been. So to get that below 11, we feel good about the trend we're continuing to see to kind of manage that mill rate. Here's the levy that eventually will be a vote tonight at our annual meeting when we close out the budget hearing, and that levy does reflect a 4.9% increase from the prior year. I already mentioned the factors that we'll continue to monitor when we get close to October and finalize our budget. That's plenty of me talking. I'm here to answer questions if there are any.
That's questions from anyone in attendance who's participating in tonight's
Absolutely.
budget hearing.
President Murphy, if there are no.
I love my wait time.
Yeah.
I'm teaching future teachers and you can see them squirm, so it's really exciting. Okay. Well, I will accept that a motion to adjourn the budget hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second? Second, Christopher. All those in favor of adjourning the budget hearing, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're moving right along. All right, I will officially call the annual meeting to order. Greetings again, everyone. Corby, could you please read the official notice for the annual meeting?
Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the Verona Area School District, Dane County, that the annual meeting for transaction of business of said district will be held at the Verona Area High School, 234 Wildcat Way in Verona on the 23rd day of September 2024, immediately following the budget hearing, which began at 5:00 p.m.
Thank you. So moving through this agenda as is written, the next item is election of chairperson, which I sort of did out of order. So I'm just going to look at Nate, who's here as our support, my support as the current chairperson. Do we need to do the election again? Okay, Thank you. I'll just continue to serve then as your chairperson for the meeting. Joe, thanks again for your financial report. Is there anything else you'd like to add after what Chad and Pete shared?
See my earlier comment.
Thank you. And again, the reference to all the documents and things that have been in board docs and the packet that maybe you all have in front of you. So moving on to any old business. Do we have any old business to address related to the annual meeting? All right, and then new business. We're going to hear from Dr. Clarity, Superintendent, on the state of the district.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us here for the annual meeting and the state of the district. Just kind of seeing our friends and community members here in the audience. This will be familiar information, as you probably will have seen it at a convocation or read it in our annual report, the academic report that went to every household within our district. And so if you see something different, that means that we're not, we didn't get it right the first time, which is incorrect. It's the same exact material. And we want to make sure that we are consistent in all the information that we are providing as far as our first 3 years and then what has brought us to today in our fourth year under this leadership team. So as we think about our 3 years of progress, I want to frame it into 3 spaces, and that is academics, culture and climate, and then also operations. And so as we think about the academic portion of our system, I would be remiss if I didn't continue to acknowledge and put into the space that every staff member in the Verona Area School District is an educator and serves our children as such, as an educator in so many ways. Each person brings a significant skill set that it impacts the outcomes for our students, whether it's directly in the classroom where we know the magic happens, or we're creating conditions for that access to happen, or removing barriers to access. Everyone that wears the lanyard or comes into our space hopefully knows that they are valued and known for being the educator in our multiple spaces, and that their work has meaning, and it has meaning because it serves students. As we think about our academic focus, it's really grounded in our strategic framework where we have really have this understanding that education is truly freedom. And when you think about that not just powerful statement, but powerful meaning and way of working, you think about academics in a way of focusing in on some of the most important skills that students need to thrive in a diverse global society, and we know that to be literacy and numeracy. And we want to make sure that there's, even from the historical context, when you think about what was intentionally removed from so many historically in our society, that we have created the space to not just replace those skills, but to make sure that they are highly developed to allow our students to have the opportunity to engage and have access to all the opportunities that we have here in the Verona Area School District. And when you can't truly have that access to opportunities if you're not literate. So that's really been our focus. And we are grounded in disciplinary literacy across our content areas to ensure that access occurs. This space that allows deep teaching practices to come to life and to ensure that we have grade level and above standards in front of every student is in the form of our PLCs, our professional learning communities. The gift that our community has given us in the form of time every Monday for professional learning communities to work on not just our craft, but be able to think intentionally about every student, to look at data and to enhance our skill set on behalf of our students is really a tribute to our community and the value they place on education, as well as the work of our staff, knowing that they are stronger together as peers in collaborative spaces than individuals. And that has been a powerful way of working that is really leading to stronger outcomes and will lead to stronger outcomes as we move forward. I want to quickly move into culture and climate and then operations. The culture and climate of our system is not just only behaviors, it's do I have a strong sense of belonging when I enter the doors of the Verona Area School District? Do I see staff that look like me? Do I see materials that my demographic or who I am are reflected? Do I have the space to be a critical thinker and talk about my wants and needs and desires to be able to thrive? And we think about the education of the whole child. There is the academic component, but the development of the whole child and making sure that they do have that strong sense of belonging here is equally as valuable. And so we pride ourselves on creating those conditions. You'll hear some of that work if you're here for the next meeting or regular meeting to form our restorative practices. We do have high expectations for student behavior, but it's also about teaching behaviors and not always looking at it from a direct consequence base, but teaching in a way that you understand that being part of a community, that is what really contributes to feeling safe. And I know this is last on the list, but it's definitely not last in the importance, and that's our operations. When you think of all the people that comprise our operations, our operations team is actually in terms of volume of staffing is larger than our teaching staff. And they have a direct impact on everything that we do, and it crosses so many facets of our educational system. From our be able to access the building today, coming into a very clean and beautiful space that is no easy task to keep this high school clean with if you're at home and if you have teenagers at your home, one is hard to keep the space clean, but much less 1,800, and they just do an amazing job. Our food services that work so hard to put nutrition in front of our students, knowing that the value of the food that we put up them may be the best value that they get, and we have to take that. Very seriously and promote that as part of our goal for wellness. Our security team that continues to keep our schools safe. And I know if I start listing them, I'll miss some, but I just want to put that into perspective. When you think about the full educational experience, I often talk about from the time you leave the house in the morning. You're going to leave and you may engage with a crossing guard or a bus driver. That's going to be that initial experience. You're going to reach school and someone's going to guide you safely to the doors. It's definitely going to be probably a staff member out front greeting you with a smile, a warm welcome. You're going to enter. There's going to be an executive assistant or a secretary or clerical to make sure that you're moving into the right space. You'll go to food service to get a meal, and all that happens before you even step foot in the classroom. And if one of those things don't work in concert with each other, the student experience is not the same. So I want to definitely acknowledge the leaders of our operations team, but our staff, that we want to ensure, sometimes they're called unheralded, but we want to, I don't know if the opposite of unheralded is heralded, but we're going to make it heralded today. That we want to make sure that it's celebrated more often. And so we don't have that title of unheralded hero, because they really are truly the heartbeat of our educational system. And then finally, as I close it, I'm moving forward to this year, I want to acknowledge twofold. When you think about coming into a system and building an organizational structure where we said we're going to use a transformational leadership model with an inverted pyramid, and that meant that we were going to make sure that the voices of our students, our staff, and everyone that comprises the educational community had that very powerful voice and was able to have action taken through the superintendent seat and through the Board of Education. And that doesn't happen if there isn't phenomenal leadership as a board in totality, and from the leadership of the board itself. So I definitely want to take an opportunity to acknowledge that these 3 years of progress don't happen without Meredith Christensen and her work as the Verona Area School District Board of Education President, and then moving that over to Jen Murphy. This just doesn't happen in the way that we have talked about without that leadership and without the decisions and without the fiscal responsibility, and allowing the space for myself and this team and our staff to be able to do their best work on behalf of students. So I want to definitely personally thank Meredith, and also thank Jen for her to continue that trend of very strong leadership in our district, and knowing that the results that we see are definitely a reflection of these two great leaders along the way. So I'll close there for any thoughts about our 3 years of progress. I know it was a kind of Cliff Notes version of the longer ones that we've sent out, but in case there were a new audience or anyone recording, I wanted to make sure they had that experience as well of understanding how we got to our space today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, additional comments on our summary of the state of the district? Okay, we will move along to resolutions. So on your agenda, you can follow along. We'll go each resolution at a time, taking motions and seconds and taking a vote again from everyone who is present who is a district resident. So our first resolution, Resolution A, fix salaries of school board members. Be it resolved that the salaries of the school board for the 24-25 school year be established as $4,683.53 for all members. Is there a motion to accept this resolution as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Teresa Voss.
Thanks.
Any further discussion about this resolution?
I just want to inquire again, this is the same as it was last year.
CPI.
It's a
Yeah, just-
4.12% increase from last year's salary, which is the same as the CPI increase that Lieutenant was. Same percentage increase that Lieutenant was.
Thank you.
I got to say something.
All right. Any other discussion given that information from Pete? Thank you, Pete. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving Resolution A as written, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution A has passed. Resolution B, adding to capital fund. Be it resolved that there be levied for the 24-25 fiscal year a tax in the amount of $1 million upon all taxable property in the Verona Area School District to be deposited into the segregated capital fund. Is there a motion to approve this resolution as written?
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. John Bremer, second, helping Lori. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Obviously, we might have a couple of things to share. This amount allows us to keep our buildings dry. It allows us to keep our buildings warm. Those are our first two priorities. Some examples of that would be our New Century and Verona Area International School Road. That you see that section being completed. We're also the new section at Badger Ridge. On top of that, we have an ongoing project at Savannah Oaks that is replacing 25 and 29-year-old equipment with new equipment, more efficient equipment, highlighted next summer by being able to install an energy recovery wheel. It's something that this building enjoys every single day, and it's a piece of technology that we'll be able to incorporate into the system at Savannah Oaks for continued energy efficiency and comfort for students and staff in that building. So the support of this allows that to happen, and is a great help to all our buildings and everyone who gets to walk through those doors every day.
Thank you, John. Any further questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there, all those in favor of approving Resolution B as written, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution B has passed. Moving on to Resolution C, adopting the tax levy. Be it resolved that there be levied a tax in the amount of $78,775,426 upon all taxable property in the Verona Area School District for the purpose of paying employee salaries and meeting other necessary expenses to operate and maintain the district schools, and to finance the debt service and capital outlay of the said district on the basis of the approved budget for the 24-25 fiscal year. Is there a motion to approve Resolution C?
Moved.
Thank you, Christopher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Corby, second. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor of approving Resolution C as written, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution C has passed. Resolution D, approve sale of district equipment. Be it resolved that the school district be allowed to sell equipment that is deemed as disposable equipment by the district. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, John. John Bremer with a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you,
Any
Christopher.
further discussion or questions? All those in favor of approving Resolution D as written, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution D has passed. Resolution E, short-term borrowing. Be it resolved that the Verona Area School District be authorized to borrow money short-term for operating expenses if needed. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion or questions about Resolution E?
F.
I know, they're off on the slide. I'm reading them from the slides and I realize they're not following the, yes. So I'm going from the slides just for the sake that they're in front of everyone.
I got you.
Okay. But thank you for noticing. All those in favor of approving short-term borrowing resolution signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution E, short-term borrowing, is approved. Moving on to Resolution F, annual meeting date and time. Be it resolved that the date of the 25-26 annual meeting be set for September 22nd, 2025. I'd actually like to make an amendment to this. If we could add at 5 p.m. Central. I work in a lot of time zones right now, so I know we probably don't have to clarify that, but if we could amend this to say at 5 p.m. Is there a motion
So
to approve, great, the resolution as amended? Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Any further discussion about the amended proposal for Resolution F? All those in favor of approving Resolution F, the annual meeting date and time as amended, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. That has been approved. Resolution G, purchase of land. Be it resolved that the school board be authorized to acquire by purchase or condemnation under Chapter 32, real estate and structures and facilities pertinent to such real estate necessary for school district purposes pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 128.10 sub 5M.
So moved.
Thank you, Corby. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Christopher. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of approving Resolution G, purchase of land, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution has passed. And Resolution H, construction and leasing of school facilities. Be it resolved that the school board be authorized to designate sites for school district buildings and provide for the erection of suitable buildings or for the lease of suitable buildings for a period not exceeding 20 years with the annual rentals fixed by the lease pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 120.10 sub 5. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. All those, or any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of approving Resolution H, construction and leasing of school facilities, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution H has passed. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn our annual meeting.
So moved.
Oh, stamping, okay. I was like, who did the motion? Moved, okay. John, oh no, I was excited about that. John, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. All those in favor of adjourning our annual meeting, please signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? So we are adjourned. Thank